Hey you guys, I'm about to read from the Conscious Voices curriculum. The curriculum is a provider's tool for prevention, early intervention, and healing trauma in the African American community. So, why care about trauma? Recently, neuroscientists discovered that traumatized brains function differently than the non-traumatized brain. This negatively impacts the ability to learn, access stored information, and perform tasks necessary to optimal academic and employment performance. Trauma may be related to inappropriate anger, impulse control, emotional reactivity, and instances of community violence. Trauma causes increased physical reactivity. So even in rest, the psychological systems of a traumatized body function at an accelerated pace. Over time, the increased blood pressure, heart rate, and elevated hormonal secretions wear on the body, weakening the immune system and making one more susceptible to illness and a shortened life expectancy. Trauma is a serious health challenge, often unrecognized by providers and consumers, meaning your healthcare provider and yourself probably aren't aware of your traumatized state. And if you're not aware of it, then you're not doing anything about it, which is a very serious health concern. Now I'm going to read the consumer 12 steps, and these 12 steps assist in healing the consumer, the person, of trauma or intervening in the trauma. Let me just scroll down. It's a long curriculum. I will post the link to the curriculum because it's online, so you can access it at any time. It's on the Alameda County website. I need to print it out so I can just be able to click to the part that I want to read. So, the Consumer 12 Steps. Information about African American health disparities is not widely available to the community. Obviously, something is wrong. Too many people are dying, too many people are murdered, and too many others are getting sick and dying before their time. African Americans tend to think they don't exercise, eat bad food, and kill each other. They often blame themselves for these conditions. When the researchers began to look into the causes of the poor health in African Americans, the results were surprising. Researchers concluded that it was not food or lack of exercise. It was not the community violence, poverty, or any other alleged self-destructive tendencies that explained the disparities. It was the stress and trauma of living with discrimination and inequality that was causing trauma and destroying the health of the community. Many African Americans do not know they are traumatized. Others know that they are feeling discomfort but can't understand why or identify what they are experiencing as trauma. Because trauma can be passed from one generation to the next, many are not aware that they may not know that they are carrying the historical trauma of their ancestors who endured slavery, or that they are experiencing trauma of discrimination and inequality that has endured after slavery. Consumers can use the 12 steps individually to examine their history or in a group while participating in well-being meetings or well-being circles. The meetings are a setting for African Americans to gather as a group, sort out these issues, and develop strategies to heal the community. The 12-step model was chosen because it is a successful model that has been used to address many difficult health concerns. Many African Americans have successfully used 12-step programs to heal substance abuse, a trauma-related condition. They have supported peers in fellowship. They have facilitated meetings. They have experienced the power of the group. Conscious Voices taps into this valuable lived experience, asking them to use Conscious Voices Consumer 12 Steps, 7 Principles, and the Well-Being Circles to assist in building a healthy African American community. Step 1. We are aware that historical trauma and discrimination may have affected our mental, physical, and spiritual health. Many African Americans are directly impacted by historical trauma that has not been addressed. Historical trauma occurs when an entire group of people experience psychological wounding repeatedly over time, resulting in severe trauma symptoms that are passed through generations. The result of historical trauma is economic, social, and health disparities and the derailing of the natural progression of the people that continues through generations. In her book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, Dr. Joy DeGruy says that because of slavery, African Americans are experiencing post-traumatic slave syndrome, a form of historical trauma that affects our health and our relationships. Trauma is passed from generation to generation, affecting every aspect of our existence. With our awareness of the possibility that we may be affected comes the opportunity to realistically examine our situation as if we are affected, begin to healing. Some may feel that slavery and discrimination are part of a distant past with no bearing on our experience today. If you have managed to live your life without being personally affected by discrimination, you too have a very important place in well-being circles. You are an important member of a community that needs healing. You have important information to add to this discussion. All perspectives are welcome. We must all work together in this endeavor and in the spirit of the 7 principles. Join us and share your experience, strength, and hope. Step 2. We made a commitment to understand how discrimination, historical trauma, including slavery, has affected the health and well-being of our families and our community. Research in fields of neuroscience and medicine identify trauma as having a disorganizing effect on the brain and devastating effects on the health of the traumatized. Despite the research, African Americans are frequently not evaluated for or offered treatments that address trauma, even though we live with discrimination and inequality. We're extremely likely to have traumatic experiences because when we live with discrimination and inequality, we're extremely likely to have traumatic experiences and poor health that is trauma related. While provider services often focus on individual experiences and behavior, research indicates that blacks experience many external social and political factors that make them subject to many disparities. High incarceration rates, unemployment, underemployment, unsafe communities, and the educational achievement gap are long-standing. So common are the disparities that they are regarded as a normal part of Black life by both providers and African Americans. Poverty is not normal, neither are community violence and school failure. Experiencing racial discrimination is not normal. While these experiences may be frequent in the community, these are actually traumatizing experiences that erode our health and our progress as a people. Because the issue of race is involved, this may be an unpopular subject in many venues and one that makes some of us uncomfortable. Courageous public discussion on this topic is an important part of the change we want to see. We become willing to push beyond our comfort zones because we know that when these important conversations become a regular part of our social discussions, people will learn that it will be more likely that appropriate change will occur in our schools, mental health, medical, and other systems. Step 3. We are willing to take steps to heal ourselves and our community from the effects of historical trauma. For hundreds of years, in order to survive slavery, dysfunctional behaviors were required. These behaviors were reinforced by the brutality of slavery and passed from generation to generation. Today, we take steps to change those negative behaviors which were deliberately instilled in our people for the purpose of control. If we decide that those behaviors are no longer serving us, we acknowledge our historical experience and how it might be affecting us today. In 1712, on the banks of the James River in Virginia, Willie Lynch, a successful plantation owner, is said to have given a speech to other plantation owners in which he described strategies that, if installed correctly in the slave community, would control the slaves for 300 years. Lynch is said to have prescribed a number of brutal and traumatizing practices that could be used by plantation owners to make the slave community more manageable and profitable. He also suggested emphasizing the differences among slaves, differences in age, hair texture, and skin color, men against women, and young against old. Lynch also advised that creating a deep distrust and division amongst them would keep the slave community perpetually divided and easily controlled for 300 years or longer unless something intervened. We are going to intervene. We do not know if the Willie Lynch story is real. However, we know that these type of strategies were employed consciously or unconsciously by plantation owners, causing trauma and deep divides among our ancestors that may still be affecting us today. People who have experienced historical trauma often don't understand how they have been affected, and yet, unless steps are taken to correct the wrong done, these disturbing experiences will continue through the generations. We are not enslaved any longer, but we should question if high rates of unemployment and poverty, incarceration and school failure, community violence, and shortened life expectancy are related to our historical trauma. Similar deficits exist in other ethnic groups that experience historical trauma, such as the Native Americans. As members of the African American well-being circles, we want to change those dynamics that were instilled in our community during slavery. We want to learn to trust each other, to build community, and have compassion for others and ourselves on the path to finding our conscious voices. Step 4. We acknowledge occasions when we experience discrimination and address those situations courageously and in a manner that maintains our integrity. Some African Americans feel the sting of discrimination daily. We speak out, we feel stress. We may fear repercussions for being outspoken. Sometimes we remain quiet but feel demoralized. Sometimes we take a risk and push back but are frustrated by the inability to have a meaningful conversation about our true experience. If we respond to discrimination, we may be accused of being angry or aggressive. Often we are angry, too angry to speak. If our situation is work-related, we fear discipline or termination. We have seen sad examples of people who spoke out. In our past, perhaps we have been the example. We have been trained not to respond, and so we are silent. If we speak, we may be punished. If we don't speak, we suffer in silence. And the committee in our mind beats us up because we failed to defend our people, ourselves, yet again. A few decades of swallowing our true feelings breaks our health down. The blood pressure goes up, the sugar goes up, and the heart is broken again. We die younger and sicker, and because of health disparity statistics, In some situations, to openly speak about slavery and discrimination carries risk. When we can, we will advocate for our community and ourselves, but we will not beat ourselves up if we are not able, or when we do so may be unwise. Today, we are always encouraged because we can go to a Conscious Voices Wellbeing Circle meeting to fellowship and discuss our experience and strategize with others who are in a similar situation. We can look to Conscious Voices providers to assist us in truly understanding and addressing our situation. Step 5. We believe that we are not alone in our struggle. We can rely on a higher power for guidance. For some of us, the wounds caused by racial discrimination are deep. Some of us do not even know that we are wounded or that as a people, we are engaged in a mighty struggle to survive mentally, physically, and spiritually. How will we transcend the dark past to create a bright future? Perhaps we need to look to a higher power. That higher power could mean God. However, we as well-being members are free to assign a personal meaning to the term. Higher power can be whatever or whomever gives you hope. Another possibility is to use the step to honor our ancestors, those who came and went before us. At times, without knowing that we are practicing an African tradition, we may speak to a parent, relative, or friend who has passed on, asking our beloved ancestor for guidance as we navigate the difficulties of life. We have far to go on the road towards health, but we can support each other and ask for guidance from our ancestors. We honor them by asking them to join us as we move forward. Libations. The choice of a higher power is, however, a personal decision. Step 6. We're committed to unity. We solve conflict peacefully, never sacrificing our unity. There will be many challenges to organizing our effort to strengthen our community. Some of these challenges will come from our own friends and families. Some may not agree that discrimination and historical trauma are of any importance. They may argue that success or failure is an individual effort. We accept that not everyone will be willing to join this discussion. We accept that not everyone will be willing to join this discussion, but we seek people who are willing. We also understand that there may be other opposition to our efforts and our well-being circles. We remain inspired because we are coming together for the important task of building community. The 12 steps and the 7 principal traditions can guide us. With any group, there will likely be conflict, opinions, and difficult personalities. We see these challenges to our unity as opportunities to grow, to learn to solve conflict constructively. We join together to address our problems, and we remain involved even when there are disagreements. We can use the principles of restorative justice to solve conflict. We have the 7 principles to guide our mission, and more shall be revealed. The overwhelming statistics on African American school failure, community violence, poverty, fatherlessness, health disparities, and the like remind us that our survival and that our children are at stake. Step 7. We realize that we heal the community and the community heals us. Discussions about slavery and discrimination have mostly been discouraged, so few of us have the skill or experience. Today, we are no longer silenced. Our duty is to our families and our community. Because of slavery and discrimination, we have suffered historical trauma that needs to be addressed. We know that healing ourselves is not enough. Without healing our community, any progress that we make individually can quickly be eroded by the inequality, the poverty, and community violence and other challenges that we face every day. We also support Conscious Voices Wellbeing Circle. We will also support and attend Conscious Voices Wellbeing Circles. Conscious Voices Wellbeing Circles present an opportunity to come together as a community for supportive fellowship to clarify and strategize regarding our individual and collective futures. The 7 principles are our guide to strengthening our community. Participation in these groups is important to our individual and community health and a demonstration of our collective hope for the future. Our children will be heartened by our organization and our expressed intention of developing a means of promoting their interests, protecting them, and the generations to come. The rules regarding the confidentiality of meetings are strict, evolving, and are for well-being circle participants to further develop. The names and identity of well-being circle participants will forever remain confidential and should never be shared at any other meeting, in any other place, or for any other purpose. This rule is to protect well-being circle participants who should be able to share freely without being identified in any outside conversation. By maintaining the anonymity of the participants, we help to protect the integrity and confidentiality of the meetings and ensure the continued availability of this important resource. Step 8. We will join our community and our allies in addressing the root causes of our community violence and reducing the negative effects on the mental, spiritual, and physical and health of our community. Early violent death is not normal or acceptable in any community. Every death in the African American community matters. Homicide shatters families and neighborhoods. It is proper for us to be shocked by the killing and to grieve the loss of our young. It is trauma that can be experienced directly and indirectly. The killing, the sirens, the memorials, the yellow tape used to secure the scene, and the anticipation of another homicide is horrific. We acknowledge the horror and the devastation this epidemic is causing. If no one disputes the murders, it sends the message that homicide in the African American community is not a serious concern. Today, we will not accept homicide as a normal part of our existence. For us, it is a very serious concern. We will seek schools that include violence prevention programs, restorative justice and social, emotional learning for our youth. We will seek out providers who are willing to bring their attention and skills to the problem of violence in our community. We will encourage the development of the code among our young. The code promotes safety in our community. We will also address community violence in our well-being groups. Through the adherence to the 7 principles, through heartfelt participation in the well-being circles, the dignity and integrity of our community will be strengthened. Step 9. We are committed to deepening our understanding of the African historical experience, how it affects us today, and how to repair the harm that was done to us. With historical trauma, slavery and discrimination discrimination became harm to the group, and it is the group that must be healed. With historical trauma, slavery, and discrimination came harm to the group, and it is the group that must be healed. Healing is accomplished in part when the people reclaim their cultural roots. Reclaiming cultural roots is problematic for us because for business purposes, during slavery, we were brutally stripped of the knowledge of our roots and culture. We were converted from African people, inhabitants of the wealthiest continent on the planet, into slaves. We were forced to deny our ethnic roots and to teach our children that they too were slaves, past, present, and future, with no country, no culture, no history, language, religion, medicine, music, art, or dance. We are resilient, resourceful, and creative people. We built culture and community, but it was necessarily shaped by the horror of slavery. We existed like this for 300 years. Failure to comply with this assault on our humanity could have easily meant death. Our condition required us to reject our African roots. Today, many in our community still reject or deny our connection to Africa, even though the identity is the significant factor in determining where we live and work, what schools we attend, how we are treated by medical, legal, banking, and other institutions. While many of us are mixed ethnically, it is the appearance of African heritage that defines our experience. Because other traumatized groups have benefited from reclaiming their roots, should we also reclaim African culture in order to heal our historical trauma? How can we? These are questions for the well-being circles to discuss. Well-being circles are intended to provide a consistent source of support for affected individuals and an opportunity to discuss important issues that affect the community. The African American doctor, lawyer, teacher, and carpenter meet with the unemployed, CalWorks, transitional age youth, and working poor. We come together as a community to share experience, strength, and hope. In this way, we heal ourselves, families, and community, and affirm our place in society. Step 10. We will work together to strengthen our community. Every day we deal with systematic inequality that is challenging our mental and physical health and reducing our life expectancy. There is hope and strength in numbers. Today, we won't allow ourselves to be divided. Light skin against dark, field hand against the house, old against the young, men against women. We accept responsibility for our situation. Our willingness to come together at well-being circles and other settings in the service of our family and our community demonstrates our unity and commitment to healing. Conflict will be settled diplomatically, perhaps through the practice of restorative justice. We will not lose sight of our common purpose and the need to work together. Through sharing our collective strength, hope, and experience, we will heal the wounds left by slavery and discrimination. We will encourage the discouraged, hearten the disheartened, and together build a strong, vibrant community. Step 11. We value fairness, honesty, and equality in all of our endeavors. In the past, we trusted African American family member, friend, business person, or service provider only to later feel betrayed by their actions. Though we have had disappointing, unfair, and scandalous experiences within our ethnic groups, we find it particularly painful when the person who crosses us is one of our own. Some of us have vowed never to trust a black person again. We are sure that our trust would likely be violated again. We harbor ill feelings toward all blacks because of the experience we have had with some blacks. We attribute the treachery of a few to the entire group. During slavery, distrust and rivalry were encouraged as a method of controlling the slave community. Today, we still have trouble trusting each other. We should question if this deep distrust we sometimes feel for each other is a legacy of slavery, one that prevents us from working together with purpose. Disagreements and deceit happen among all peoples. However, other ethnic groups seem to be able to continue cooperating and building successful communities. We, on the other hand, continue to be challenged. If any person lacks integrity, we do not have to deal with that person. That decision, however, should relate to that individual and not the entire community. We have so much work in front of us that it requires cooperation and trust. We must not let betrayals or the injuries past or present deter us. Ours too must be a community capable of collaborating and strategizing. We strive to strengthen the community and protect and promote the interests of our children. They are our future. Step 12. Having awakened and found our conscious voice, we will carry this message to others. Having considered the previous steps, we are more aware of the effects that trauma, historical trauma, and discrimination have had on our community. In order to repair our community, we educate ourselves so that we can assist family, friends, and others in understanding our mission. We will support each other in building a more just and progressive community. We encourage an open and honest examination of community issues. Perhaps in the past, we were uncomfortable or felt unprepared to discuss these issues. We now know that this discussion, though difficult, is the foundation on which we build. It is our responsibility to engage in the dialogue and, when possible, to advocate for a more just and equitable society. The issues in the African American community require a historic approach, one that considers our unique historical experience and shows concern for the mind, body, and spirit. As a community, we act in a manner that demonstrates our belief in social justice and the ability of our community to heal from our difficult past, challenge the present, and forge a brighter future. We will form an alliance with other conscious people. We know that we heal the community and the community heals us. It is through our combined effort that we will find our conscious voices and continue to pass on this message to others. And I'm just going to recap on what the 12 steps are. Number 1. Step 1. We are aware that historical trauma and discrimination may have affected our mental, physical, and spiritual health. Step 2. We made a commitment to understand how discrimination, historical trauma, including slavery, has affected the health and well-being of our family and community. Step 3, we are willing to take steps to heal our community and ourselves from the effects of historical trauma. Step 4, we acknowledge occasions when we experienced discrimination and address those situations courageously and in a manner that maintains our integrity. Step 5, we believe that we are not alone in our struggle. We can rely on a higher power for guidance. Step 6, we are committed to unity. We solve conflict peacefully, never sacrificing our unity. Step 7, we realize we heal the community and the community heals us. Step 8, we will join our community and our allies in addressing the root causes of community violence and reducing the negative effects on the mental, spiritual, and physical health of our community. Step 9, we are committed to deepening our understanding of the African American historical experience, how it affects us today, and how to repair the harm that was done. Step 10, we will work together to strengthen our community. Step 11, we value fairness, honesty, and equality in all of our endeavors. Step 12, having awakened and found our conscious voice, we will carry this message to others. Again, I will post the link to the full curriculum. This curriculum is also designed for providers to see how they, what they can do to help the African American community have a better experience as their patient. Peace out, because it's already past 30 minutes. Love y'all.